The goals of this module are to first know what the 5 functional groups are. Secondly, to understand why we use functional groups for sanitation system planning. And finally, to be able to identify what functional groups some simple technologies belong to. Before we begin on functional groups, let's quickly review what a system is. A system is a set of things working together as parts of a mechanism or an interconnecting network, a complex whole. Building a complex whole requires a way of organizing all of the parts so that you're not putting the pieces out of order or using more pieces than you actually need. Let's start with the example of a computer. First, you need some way to control it, a mouse or a keyboard. Then you need some way to see the output. There's a variety of options here. There needs to be some way to power the computer, and of course, some way to store and process the information. These categories could also be called functional groups. They help us to categorize the components so that we include all the necessary parts, but don't end up with too many that aren't necessary. The same is true with the functional groups for sanitation planning. The first of the 5 functional groups that we will discuss is called the user interface. In this and subsequent lectures, we will always use the same color for each of the functional groups. The user interface in our lectures will always be red. The user interface, just as in our computer example, is how you physically interact with the system. It is where the products enter the system, so basically, the toilet. But there are many different types of toilets. You can see 5 examples of different toilets here. Some use water, some do not, but because they all serve the same function, they're all categorized into the user interface functional group. The collection and storage functional group contains all the technologies that collect and store the products that enter into the sanitation system at the user interface. A simple pit latrine is an example of a technology from this functional group. It stores the excreta and the toilet paper and doesn't do anything else. It doesn't provide any type of treatment, for example. It just collects and stores. One of the most important but least considered functional groups is the conveyance group. Technologies in this category are responsible for the movement of products. The trucks that move fecal sludge that we saw in the last module on products would belong to this functional group. Big sewers that run beneath cities and transport black water are another example. The 4th functional group is where most of the treatment takes place. It is important to remember that a system may include 2 or more technologies from the same functional group, or, on the other hand, maybe none. Depending on the number and composition of the products that enter the system, several parallel or sequential technologies may be required from this treatment functional group. Treatment for sludge and effluent, for example, would be parallel treatment technologies that would be required. The final functional group is called use or disposal. This is a special functional group because it includes not just technologies, but also processes or actions. The application of urine, for example, after it has been stored and hygienized, can be applied as a liquid fertilizer to crops. The application of urine, therefore, would be considered as part of this functional group. Let's look at a really simple system and see how the functional groups can be used to help explain what's going on. In rural areas of low-income countries, where there is little water but a lot of space, a simple squatting slab like this one can be placed over a deep pit. The slab is the user interface, and the pit, as you can see being built here, is a technology from the collection and storage functional group. This simple system requires technology from only 2 functional groups. The sanitation system that exists across most of Europe consists of a flush toilet connected to a sewer. The sewer transports the black water to a wastewater treatment plant where it is treated to an acceptable quality before it is discharged. Here we can see that the system requires the combination of technologies from 3 different functional groups: user interface, conveyance, and treatment. What about the dense urban areas of low-income countries? How many functional groups would be needed to design a sanitation system here? In fact, there's no single answer to this question, as there are many different factors and constraints that need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. The rest of this course will focus on thinking about the challenges and possible solutions for urban areas in low-income countries. In fact, the sanitation systems required can become quite complex, so the functional groups will become very useful in helping us to organize and select the technologies that will be needed to build a complete system. Here we can see a schematic of a dense area with different technologies in place. The technologies are color-coded to match the functional groups that they came from. First, you can see a pore flush squatting slab. The black water from here flows into a septic tank. It is collected and stored until it can be transported by the pump truck to the fecal sludge treatment plant. Once the sludge has been treated, it can be mixed into soil to improve the quality and potentially be used in agriculture. This is just one possible design, but it demonstrates a system that includes technologies from each of the functional groups and illustrates how they can be put together. So, to summarize, we build our sanitation system using technologies from 5 different functional groups, but not every system requires a technology from each functional group. The dense urban areas in low-income countries are complex, and as such, there is no strict formula for how to design them, but we can use functional groups to help organize and plan an appropriate system based on the products and technologies that we have available. The next module will introduce you to the different technologies that belong in each of the functional groups.